Next, from Wheeling, Governor Rauner holds a roundtable with business owners as they discuss policies that are hurting small and big business and often driving them out of the state. This runs about 35 minutes.
You know, we try to create an environment so you can thrive, because your success is key to Illinois' success. If you're not succeeding, if you're not competitive, if you're not growing, Illinois is not doing well, and we're not doing our jobs as elected officials. And one of the things I enjoy the most about my work, and one of the most important priorities for me, is meeting with folks who are growing our economy and out there in the firing lines every day getting things done, and listening to your concerns, your advice, your criticisms, your ideas. And that's really what today's about. I've spent most of the last 3 years meeting with small business owners, listening to the concerns, meeting with your employees, because your employers are the folks who I work for. Your success is the key for Illinois' prosperity. And I've been listening a lot. Today, we invited some of members of the media to listen to what I'm hearing real time. Just, you know, you lay it out as it is, how you see it. And, you know, unvarnished, you've got to build your business, you got to compete, you got to grow, and we want to hear about your concerns so we can make it better for you. So I would like to go around the table so everybody can hear just your names, your role, and just a short summary of your company so people understand where you're coming from. And then I'd like to open it up for comments after that. So we'll just start. Here's Senator Murphy.
Senator Matt Murphy, represent the Northwest Suburban Cook area. Glad to be here and look forward to hearing what you guys have to tell us.
My name is Robert Kuhn. I'm the owner of Timber Links and Arlington Links. We're in the entertainment business.
I'm David Kolsak. I'm the president of Turnkey IT. It's an outsourced IT firm right here in Wheeling. My family also owns the funeral home in Wheeling that recently got our liquor license. So I represent
one thing I'll ask too, there's microphones scattered around so that the TV cameras and those who are just sitting in an audience can hear you. Speak with trajectory and slide the microphone. It doesn't have to be right in front of you, but just get it close to you so that people can hear it. Go ahead.
I'm Mark Hagan. We are a contract manufacturer of sheet metal and machining products.
My name's Peter Hested. I'm president of Tool King. We're a raw material supplier to people like Keats, other manufacturers throughout the United States, Europe, and South America.
Morning, I'm Brandon Bales. I own Natural Expressions Custom Furniture, and we build custom furniture reproductions and do closet component manufacturing.
Good morning, Governor. I'm Al Panico. I own a company called The Line Group. We're a contract metal stamper, and I just want to say we appreciate you coming and listening to the people who are the job creators in this state.
I'll second that. Good morning, Governor. My name is Don Kovalik. I'm with Kovalik Construction. We are a construction general contractor with contracts at the federal, state, and municipal levels.
My name is Laura Rios, and I work with the college readiness program called Waukegan to College. We start working with students as young as 5th grade to prepare them for college in the hopes that they're prepared for jobs of the future.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Fred Long. I represent UCAN on the nonprofit side. We provide probably about services for 10,000 youth, children, and families across the city of Chicago. And those services range from workforce development, school-based education, and community-based violence prevention programming. Oh, can you get it?
And I'm Wade Keats, President and CEO of Keats Manufacturing. Welcome to Keats Manufacturing. We're a metal stamper, contract metal stamper, assembler, wire former, facilities here and also in Texas.
Why'd you say it like that, Wade?
Keep it all here. Keep it all here in Illinois.
And I'm Matt Eggemeyer, also from Keats Manufacturing, Wade's partner, and we love manufacturing here in Illinois. We'd love to stay here in Illinois, but obviously there's some pressures that are pushing us out, and I'm sure that's something the governor will talk about.
Great. All right, so let me set the stage, and then let's open it up for your comments and just get a free-flowing dialogue. In my travels around the state for the last 3 years, I've heard a lot of feedback, a lot of advice, a lot of concerns. I'll say the number one regulatory concern is workers' comp costs. That is, especially in manufacturing, that's just not competitive, extremely high. We have a system with a lot of fraud and abuse in it. Extremely legally expensive, a lot of lawsuits, a lot of arbitration, just very burdensome and very bureaucratic and expensive. And many business owners have told me it's the #1 reason that they've been pushed out of the state. Caterpillar told me it's their #1 uncompetitive factor in Illinois. They're a proud big employer in Illinois, but it's the reason that for decades they've been growing their jobs not in Illinois. They've been growing them in Texas and Georgia and other states where workers' comp costs 1/5 as much as in Illinois. So love to any comments on that issue. But then broadly, I've heard about regulatory red tape, just a lot of reporting, restrictions, filings, permits, kind of a burden of government bureaucracy that is hindering your growth and your ability to expand your business. I've heard a lot about that too. Far and away, the biggest criticism I've heard of our state in terms of taxes is our property tax burden. When I travel, boy, I can't talk to anybody. I can't talk to a single person in the state, whether it's a business owner or a homeowner or anybody, who doesn't say the property taxes are killing them and we've got to do something about it. It's the #1 tax problem. Love to hear your comments. You may have other tax issues you want to raise, but that's the #1 issue I hear. Yeah.
In 2006, I was paying about $60,000 in property taxes, and I just got the new assessment. It's $117,000. I guarantee you, I'm at the end of a private road. I don't get any services from the town of Arlington Heights. I get police and fire. I'm not getting twice the service for the money. I can guarantee you that, and that's a huge part of my overhead.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And then and then I'll open it up. The one other concern I've heard repeatedly is folks who pay attention to what's going on in the government see the constant deficits. We don't pay our pensions, we have deficits, we borrow, and it scares that if you're an investor, if you're a business builder and you're going to invest in a state, would you put it into a state where they're financially irresponsible, where they constantly spend more than bring in, and then talk about raising taxes to cover it, as opposed to trying to change the system and make it more efficient so that get at the reasons for the deficit spending, rather than just putting a tax increase on you as a way to get out of it. I've heard that everywhere I go. So comment on those 3 issues that I've heard, but also let's bring up other issues I'd like to hear of your concerns. Your point about your property taxes almost doubling since what year was that, 06?
2006, yeah.
Okay, so property taxes almost doubled in the last 9 years. That's a pace of change that's completely it's unaffordable. You can't keep up that pace, and it's happening in far too many communities.
I've got a couple issues, if you don't mind.
No, it's great.
Governor, again, thank you for coming here. 2 things, taxes, personally, S corporations that flows through to the person, and then we also have replacement tax on top of that, which is an additional burden for our state. And that's why it's interesting when you look at Indiana and how they thrive. They don't have as much of that, if any. And then the second thing is creating incentives for small businesses like us to actually take people off of unemployment and get them working. And we're the driver, we're the economic engine. I've never seen a business person like yourself, who's now a politician, who's really focused and listening to the small business. And I think that there's kind of a movement here nationally about this idea that incentivizing these small businesses can really get our economy going, and that's what we really have here. That's our forte. I think it's somewhere around 48% of all businesses in the United States are small. So if those things can happen, first, the lesser burden on the individual who happens to own the S corporation getting hammered if they're being successful, and then secondly, incentivizing us to take people off of those roles from unemployment and the burden of the state to help us help ourselves and help the economy, and it's just a domino effect.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons I take so much time to listen to you all and small business owners all over Illinois. The majority of people in Illinois and across America, but the majority of people in Illinois either own a small business or work in a small business. The majority of people. So we got to listen to what's going on in small business. And if small business isn't growing, you can't pay your people more, and you can't create more jobs, and you can't expand our tax base. So your success is so key to Illinois' success. And I've seen statistics many times. 2/3 of the jobs created in America and across Illinois, 2/3 of the new jobs come from small business. 2/3 of the new jobs. So you guys are the backbone. You've got to succeed. We got to create an environment where you can compete, and you're not tempted to go other places. You've got an obligation to your shareholders and your investors and your families to make sure your business is successful and optimizes its performance. And you've got other states who would love to get you. I know. I hear all the time, Wisconsin comes calling. Hey, move to Wisconsin. Texas governors used to come up here all the time. Now, they don't come as much anymore since I got in office. And no, that's a fact. And I told the Texas governor, who's a friend of mine, I said, you wait until we get some reforms in Illinois. I'm coming down to Austin, I'm coming down to Dallas, I'm coming down to Houston, and you watch the companies come up here because we got hardworking people and we got the best strategic location of any state. You know what, it frosts me, I'm a competitive guy, it frosts me no end. The #1 state where our companies, our jobs have been going, you guys know what it is? Indiana. I mean, come on. They ain't going there for the weather. I mean, this is about a competitive environment. And now workers' comp cost in Indiana is the lowest in America. We're not going to be the lowest in America. I don't think we need to be the lowest in America in order to keep companies from going over there. But we got to be at least average or competitive. We can't be at the top. They're the lowest cost. Let's be in the middle and we can compete because we got a better location, better infrastructure, and I think we've got the harder working folks. So that's a big part of what we're trying to drive.
David, there's two things that happened this year that I think are important to your point. Two taxes pushed by Speaker Madigan in particular that go right to what you're talking about. There was a millionaire's tax and then the graduated income tax that would put a substantially higher tax rate on the job creators and the investors, the risk takers you're talking about. So it was a disconnect between Speaker Madigan and the very middle class he claims to want to protect. What you're telling us right now is to the extent that they go after with higher taxes the people who create these small businesses, they're not just going after them. They're going after all the people they employ. And to the extent that they're doing that, that's not protecting the middle class, that's endangering the middle class. Fortunately, the governor and those of us in the Republican side and a few of the Democrats, frankly, in Springfield stood up and said, we're not going to go down that road. And those two provisions to amend the Constitution died. But make no mistake, Speaker Madigan is looking for those political wedge issues. And he doesn't really care, frankly, if you, and by extension, your employees get hurt in the process.
How do we change his mindset?
Well, a big part of it is this process of communicating out with the people of Illinois, and especially through the media, that we've got to get the message out of how important it is that we change and become more competitive. We have been very focused in Illinois, I think in a good way, very focused on being compassionate, helping the most vulnerable, helping those in need. I'm a big advocate for that. We can't afford to do that if we're not competitive. Over time, we just can't keep up and we can't afford it. Simple math is we can't have our government spending grow at a faster rate than our economy and our families' incomes grow. You can't, eventually it just collapses. Well, that's where we are. Our government spending has been on a rocket ship and our economy has been flat for years and years. In fact, it's down since '99. We have fewer jobs in Illinois since 1999. And we've been one of the lowest growing states in America for decades. This is not a recent event. And we just got to get that message out there and encourage residents to call their legislators and say, let's reform, let's change the system. Let's get some pro-growth, pro-investment, pro-job creation reforms. That's really what a lot of this is about, is getting that message out there.
So, Governor, I think one of the things, sure, property tax, workers' comp costs, it hurts all of us in the manufacturing field. But I think the bigger thing is that most of us are second and third tier type suppliers, and those primary manufacturers have left the state, and they're pushing us to follow them. And that's a hard thing. Now, fortunately, I think we have a state where we make and highly specialized product and services that have to be done here in Chicago, and that's great. But when a customer says we're going to pull the work unless you move to Texas or you move to Mexico, what do we do? We don't want to move.
Did one of your customers encourage you to open your plant in Texas?
Oh yeah, yeah. Eureka vacuum cleaners.
Eureka vacuum cleaners. Yeah.
They were our #1 customer at the time, and
From Bloomington, Illinois.
Yeah.
Oh, they were from Bloomington, but they said they wanted you to be in Texas.
They moved.
No, they said we had to be there.
They moved their plant. They had to be. Yes.
Or else.
Yeah.
And that's the shame, because there's so many layers of manufacture beneath a Eureka or a Maytag or somebody like that. And I hope that trend can reverse itself somehow.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's one of my personal biggest concerns. I have to be very blunt about it. Detroit and Southeast Michigan is a number of years ahead of where we're sliding. You know, the auto industry has had competitive challenges like manufacturing has in America, but the auto industry is doing reasonably well now in America, but they're not doing it well in Detroit. They're doing it in Texas and Tennessee and Georgia and South Carolina. Manufacturing has moved to the states where their regulations are more competitive and their tax burden is more competitive. And they've left Detroit, and it's devastated the economy and devastated the government and the taxes, and you can see where the city of Detroit ended up. And they're not able to provide the human services for their most vulnerable residents because their economy has been imploded. Now, they hit there faster because they overly relied on one industry. Illinois is blessed. We don't overly rely on the auto industry. But we rely heavily on manufacturing. And our decline is not as rapid, or the movement is not as rapid as it's happened in Michigan, but it's happening. And we've got to wake up and deal with it now because it's happening, and it's going to continue if we don't change the regulatory burden and the trajectory.
You know, I was going to say, one of the biggest problems with the government today, it's run by lawyers and not by business people. A business person is going to look at a situation and say, is this feasible or not? Is this economical? Where the lawyers don't look at it that way. They're terrible business people. And that's what we need. We need good business people to get into the government because we know that when we run out of money, we have to stop spending. When the government runs out of money, they don't stop spending. No, and sooner or later, you know, you want to talk about the taxes, the property taxes, and I don't understand why that you haven't gone after the city of Chicago and start getting some of that TIF money back. Because the TIF steals $400 million a year out of the tax fund. $200 million a year should go to the schools. Over the last 16 years, they have taken $3.328 billion out of the schools, and that should be stopped. That's stealing, you know. And the problem is it creates a deficit for the schools because in these buildings that are in TIFs, a lot of them become higher end districts where you have residential areas, and you got to put those kids in school. So who has to pay for it? The other residents who already bought that school. They have to buy new schools. They have to buy new teachers. And I think that's one thing that you really, I think, should go after, Emmanuel, and say, hey, you know, you're getting all that money for free, and they're spending that money any way they want. And there's no justification on how they spend the money.
Yeah, well, that's fair. I don't know, Senator, do you want to
Sure.
comment about this?
Yeah, we've had, and this issue has come up a lot, and Chicago does sort of kick some of their TIF money back to CPS, so some of it makes it there, but not as enough, but not quite as much as it would if the TIF didn't exist, and there's no transparency around the TIF. The other thing is, when they take that money and put it in a TIF, it reduces their local wealth for property tax purposes. So they end up spiking how much they get from the state funding formula when they take that money offline and put it in a TIF. So basically, they're taking advantage of the TIF system to get more state tax dollars for their K through 12, while actually they spend more in Chicago than we do in Palatine. So it's an issue, but it's been on people's radar.
Yeah, there are issues that we have some disagreements with leadership in Chicago, but what we're trying to focus on now is really finding common ground. Yep. We want to get more money to schools. My big push is to increase state support for schools because we're the worst state for supporting our local schools of anywhere in America, and it puts too much pressure on our property taxes. So if we can make the state government more efficient, reduce the bureaucracy there, take that savings and put it into the schools, that'll help Chicago schools. That will help the schools all over the state. So that's a big push we're making right now. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm going to come from the nonprofit sector in regards to this conversation. Just to kind of go a little bit back to David's interpretation in terms of addressing the unemployment and incentivizing businesses, you know, to kind of address that population. And, you know, as I look around the table, each of these men here and women, I think we represent the nonprofit side of this, have a family-owned business. And so there's going to be a lineage of your family members that would kind of drive right into the business. And we on the nonprofit side don't have that ability. But we have a large, contingency of folks that want to work. And we're heavily dependent of government contracts, but we need, as an agency, we need to drive the private sector into investing into the young people and families that we serve. So I'm always looking at how do we connect who we serve to like the gentleman around this table. And that's one thing that we haven't figured out yet on the nonprofit side, and I would love to kind of hear what initiative you have to address that in particular. Whether it's government incentivized or not, I think it's something that we need to kind of encourage, the private sector as well, to kind of, outside of government, the folks around this table, to kind of invest in these populations of potential workforce.
I'm actually going to answer part of this. I mean, in manufacturing world, we are looking for good candidates. And here at Keats Manufacturing, we aren't necessarily looking for someone with a degree in metal stamping. It doesn't exist. I have 3 jobs that are open right now. And it's good networking. Thank you.
I also think one of the things that you can do as a nonprofit is go out and start talking to the high schools and even the grammar schools. Because one of the things we've got to do as manufacturers is we've got to get in the parents' heads and in the kids' heads that manufacturing is sexy again. And it's not just sexy, but it can really provide a decent living. There's folks here probably on the floor that are making $65,000, $75,000, and $80,000 a year, and not every kid is college material. And we've got to take that concept out of their head. You can do well and make a good living doing something other than going to college.
Yeah, no, that's so well said. I want to emphasize this point because this disconnect is one of the biggest failures that we have in Illinois. As I travel the state, I hear from literally hundreds of companies, just like Keats Manufacturing, say, we've got job openings. We need welders. We need mechanics. We need technicians. We need maintenance people. And they've got job openings. I've heard about hundreds of job openings. And then I hear around the state from people like Fred, boy, we've got these young people eager to work. There's a huge disconnect in the state. Now, part of it is the education system. We have an education system, frankly, that is not of sufficient quality. But what we do is we have a mindset that every young person should go to a 4-year college. That should be the goal. Well, that's a fine goal, and maybe everybody who wants to should. But you know what? Not everybody wants to, and not everybody, frankly, has that as their best outcome. But everybody in Illinois deserves a career that pays well. Everybody, and the good news is there are careers available that pay well that don't need a college degree. They need an ability to work hard and listen and pick up some technical skills, some hand skills. And you know what? Being a welder, and there are hundreds of welding jobs available in the companies that I've visited with, being a welder right out of, a teenager, you can start making more than $40,000 a year. You can make $50,000 a year. That's the state average income. So, and you can do that right out of high school. But exactly, with all kinds of benefits. What we don't do in our high schools is provide a little bit of the training. We used to do it better 40, 50 years ago. We've moved away from it. We've moved to this college for everyone. But we could offer, in conjunction with local employers, we'd love to get a high school student for the summer or whatever, expose them to what the technical skills, get a welding class or a mechanics class in school, and do partnerships between the local community college, the high school, and the local employers. Some communities do it. Danville's doing some, Rockford's doing some. Here in Wheeling, 214, there's some. But we got to do it on a scale where we can move the needle. So Fred, you don't have so many young people who are looking for work and are eager to be good, hard employees, but don't have the skills and the connections to the employers. And frankly, in the city of Chicago, which used to be the manufacturing hub of America, the manufacturers have moved out of Chicago. Property taxes, regulations, restrictions, whatever. The tax issue, and the local employers who could employ so many of these great young people have moved far away. And a job's not a job if you got to commute for 2 hours. It's not an option for these young people. We got to get employers in the local communities and get them the technical skills, not necessarily going to college, but where they can step in and be a welder or be a metal stamper, because with a little bit of training they can do it.
So the focus of our organization is to get students into a four-year university, but we also recognize that not all students are on a track to a four-year university. However, in order for them to be able to get into really good paying jobs, they still have to have basic math skills, basic English and reading skills. And so a lot of school districts, and the school district where I work in Waukegan, they're facing many challenges. And I'd like to know more about if you have any specific plans around your investment in education so that students, whether they are on a path to college or are on a path to a trade, a vocation, really have a fighting chance out of poverty. So in this district right now, 80% of the students aren't college ready. 20% just give up and drop out. And you know, there are great teachers there. There are families who really want the best for their children, but they don't see a lot of options right now. They don't see a way out of poverty. So where is the investment in education? And then also for those students on their way to college, they do rely heavily on the MAP grants. And so without a state budget passed, that could be the make it or break it for that student to go on to a four-year university.
No, that's right. Well, you've raised some critical issues. Let me touch on them. First, the lack of MAP grants is an outrage to me. I mean, my wife and I have been huge supporters of scholarships for low-income kids for 30 years. We have a duty to help low-income students who can't afford a college or higher education. And even though we don't have a budget, money could be made available quickly and easily on a basis that Democrats and Republicans agree on, and that's procurement reform. We could just buy things more effectively at the state level, save $500 million, wouldn't need a tax hike, but $500 million is more than our MAP grant funding program is. So it could be solved immediately if some of the leadership in the General Assembly was willing to do some modest reforms that are not harmful in any regard other than just providing more efficiency. But you raise, when you come to education funding, the single biggest priority with our taxpayer dollars, and it's critical that we must increase our state support for our schools. Education is the most important thing. We've got to help our small business owners become bigger businesses so that they can employ people, but we've got to give our young people the education, as you point out, so they can take advantage. They need the basic math skills, the language skills, the writing skills in order to be good employees. And Illinois, one of the reasons I ran for governor is we are the worst state in America for school funding. We're 50 out of 50, we're dead last. We overly rely on local property taxes, and 4 times in the last 10 years, the majority in the General Assembly has cut school funding. That is wrong. We're already at the bottom. We don't reduce it. It should be going up. We should get more efficient government and use that money to fund our schools. And so we're pushing every year. Now, this year we're pushing for the full foundation level. Next year I want to go beyond the foundation level, more money for our schools. We also need the way that the money is allocated, because it's, when the Democrats put in the formula back in 2003, it didn't really help low-income school districts enough. It didn't help rural districts enough. And so whether it's Chicago or Waukegan or North Chicago or East St. Louis or Rockford, they don't get enough money given the number of kids from low-income families. I'm an advocate for changing it, but changing it is really hard. It's politically very volatile. And we're going to keep working every day to try to change the formula. But what we shouldn't do is hold up more money in total going under even if we have to live with the existing system for a little while longer, at least the existing system does something. What we can't do is say, well, the system for allocating isn't optimal, so let's not open our schools in the fall. That would be a mistake. That we can't support. But more money for the schools to help our teachers, critical, and that's our #1 priority for where the taxpayer dollars should go.
Remember, keep in mind that the lottery was created to assist the schools, but the General Assembly decided to take the money and not filter it back to the schools. And it would have been nice if
Actually, they do get all the money. The lottery raises about $650 million. Between local, state, and federal money, we spend about $30 billion on schools. So they do get it all. Governor Thompson sold that really well, because I think I hear that about every week, every other week.
The more interesting thing is, Governor, you said that we're the last in terms of funding schools, but we're first now in real estate taxes around the country, and the school portion of that is the most expensive. And, you know, any manufacturing business, while we want to support the local schools, I don't think we need to support it to 65 or 70% of our real estate taxes. So how can we be so poor at funding it and be so rich at funding it at the same time and still be in the position we're in?
That's a great question. And part of it is our wasteful bureaucracy. Illinois, for example, Illinois is the worst in America for numbers of units of government. One of the reasons we have the highest property tax is we have more units of government than any state. We have 2,000 more units of government than the number 2 state. We have 7,000 units of government, by far the most. And they have layers of patronage and cronyism and pensions, and many have taxing authority. That's a big part of it, and that's why we're pushing government consolidation. But again, that's a change, and these government entities are somebody's kingdom. They're somebody's fiefdom, and they don't want to give up that fiefdom. So politically, it's very hard, but we've got to do it. Likewise, in our state government, we have a bloated bureaucracy that's incredibly wasteful. For example, our procurement system. We waste $500 million just because we buy ineffectively. And we have work rules and restrictions on running our state agencies that are atrocious. It requires overtime. And frankly, what I found is most of our departments either don't have a computer at all, or they have a computer from 1974 running software that's basically doesn't even exist anymore. And it costs an arm and a leg to maintain it, and it's incredibly inefficient. We're the 3rd highest spending state in America for IT. We spend like $800 million a year on our IT system. We're 5th from the bottom for digital services delivered. And that's where the money is and that could save us $500 million a year. That could go to the schools. We have wasteful spending in the government that could go to our schools. We don't have to raise taxes to help our schools, and that's what we're going to change. All right, I think I got the high sign that we need to wrap up. We're gonna do a media availability. Is everybody talking to the media or just me? Okay. Okay. Take a break. Okay, great.